to be a little bit original, in some conference organized on accessibility issue, I will speak about inaccessibility. So just to finalize that. Okay, this is a work that is very collaborative work as well. Part of this work is related to the transport equity cost action that I was chairing during 4 years, and a lot of people in the room were involved in this cost action, as well as me, James, Karst, a lot of them, Francesca, etc. So it's very interesting for me to have your feedback, because I think that it's already by 2 years ago I started to present some aspect of what I will present today, but I try to sophisticate, I try to build up, because for speaking about the inaccessibility, you need really to define some stuff thing. So this is what I will present today. The first point was just related to the difference between needs-based and utility-based approach. Then we will go to define why needs are relevant, and why we advocate for a different approach that is not that is out of the paternalistic approach. We will go on some feedback about the rights and needs. So this is what a little bit something related to the rights to the city, mobility and needs of the city, of urban services in the cities. And then we will define, we will try to present the methodology for eliciting needs, and finally we define an inaccessibility index like a tool for eliciting needs. So it's not for speaking about accessibility, it's really something that is very related to oriented to eliciting needs. And then I will do just a few slides about the case studies where we are trying to implement the needs approach. And both are located in the region of Barcelona. One, it's the person is here as well, and it's about the metropolitan area of Barcelona, so more in a strategic way, in strategic cases, if you want. And another one is about an infrastructure extension project, and tramway. So, oops, sorry. Okay. Okay, this is what when we started the cost action, we were thinking about why we use always the cost-benefit analysis for evaluating project, and what make a problem in the cost-benefit analysis. And one problem that we detected using land use and transport models for Madrid was that all the variables that you can put in your cost-benefit analysis are quite irrelevant in respect to the time travel saving. So this is a little bit a problem. Like we said this morning with the James and Jago presentation, and as well this afternoon, what we need to really to see exactly which kind of variables, additional variables, or a different way to weight the variables we need. So this was not enough, and last year with Karen Martens, we defined a framework for trying to substitute the travel time saving in cost-benefit analysis, or at least in the evaluation of a transport project. Why we decide to go more on the needs approach? Because at the beginning, we started from the egalitarianism, sufficientarism, and prioritarism, all of the idealism of decision, of the way to take the decision, of taking decision, and we taste using some case studies that all kind of this approach was not enough for doing equity in transport. So this is what makes a problem. And so we were looking for some different approach because of that. So this is the origin why we dedicate time to to find another approach, alternative approach. And we were thinking about the need approach. That is not very clear in the literature. I was presenting some similar things to the European Transport Conference in Barcelona, I think a couple of weeks ago. And some people at the end of the presentation told me, you know, the needs is very complicated to know what you put in the needs. And the preference is so simple, so you have no chance to go on with your approach. More or less, was this the conclusion they said. I said, okay, maybe, but maybe there is some way, some effort to dedicate, because preference is a very restrictive way to present to the. I mean, all people have some needs. Only few people can have the preference for something. So what we said before in the Cecilia presentation is that, okay, how much accessibility do you want? And maybe what we need to think about is how much accessibility really we need. So this is already a way to define a set and put some limits to the accessibility over doses of accessibility. And the idea as well that we would like to see was that the needs should be very related to some specific aspects, because what we have in literature, as well what we have in all the approach that was used by a need-based approach, was said, okay, these neighborhoods is low-income neighborhoods with a very low accessibility for transport, so they need a bus. We would like to avoid this kind of approach, and we would like to go exactly to the people, but not only to the participation of people to some debate, but by randomly see exactly what people would you like to need, would you like to have, and what they need, more what they need. So we define the need of carry about. We looking about the behavior of people, and what people were needing was to carry out specific daily activities, like to go to the hospital, to school, food shopping, take care of other people mobility. This is some purpose. This is very important in the mobility, even if we still don't have in the survey, any survey at my knowledge that try to include the mobility of caring like a purpose aspect. And if we see if we see the literature, we can see that a lot of research was done about the relevance of needs by Carrie in Australia, but always they are very oriented to the, okay, we know what you need because we do like an assessment of the zone of the urban area about the needs. And then we know that needs and physical social exclusion have something to do together. So if we would like to avoid social exclusion, maybe we need to focus on needs and in some way. And then we can observe that the real need of people, to observing the real need of people is very challenging. It's not so simple to define what they need. If I ask it to you, what do you need today for going to the restaurant, maybe each of you will have some different answer. It depends about the activity that they would like to do, etc. So it is quite challenging to listen the needs of people. going in this way, we were as well, we tried to see what we can find in literature, and especially we analyzed the urbanism literature, and we can go back to Lefebvre, and he dedicates a titled book to the rights of the city, like 4 or 5 pages only to the rights of the urban city services. So we don't have too much in this book. But in any case, it was quite important what he said, and generally speaking, we have like the needs to have a place where to live, and so we generate the right to housing, and then we have the needs to be in good health, and we generate the rights to the healthcare, and so on. When we go to the mobility or to the accessibility, if you want, we don't find any specific definition of at the European level. We can find some needs to carry out some specific activities, so it's for that we have the right to mobility. But we have not like a universal right, recognized right to be to have access to something or to be mobile, because we need to have access to specific activities. So this is a problem, because for European perspective, by the European perspective, we can have the mobility rights, the rights to mobility, only when we are already on the trip. If we are passenger, so we have the rights to be reimbursed if we lose the transport, the train or the flight, etc. So all this kind of thinking were related to the how we abort the question of the needs, and we decide to go to the literature. And the definition, we can find different kind of definition for needs, and that can make sense for mobility. And we did a work with Jesper Ivarsson, Sigal Kaplan, and Joao Abreu, Yoram Shiftan. And we try to operationalize the concept of the existence needs, because it was really the definition and the concept more related to the mobility. So this kind of existence needs have inside the exercise, the health, safety, security, multitasking during travel, overcoming the distance barrier to maintain the life opportunities. And then if we see this the space where we are living, we have this kind of space where, okay, what do you need? We need to get in this mall. This is the Sanadu in Madrid, and of course, here we need a car. So maybe it's complicated to elicit the needs of people who are around, who are living or would like to go in this center without have some problem and sustainability or health perspective. As well, if when we go on the other kind of country, okay, these people eventually they need to get some activities, but they are completely in traffic jamming. Now I don't know if there is worse the first situation or the second one. I leave people to think about this. Okay, we define more or less the needs approach. So the basic idea is that we would like to lend it the notion and the concept of needs related to some specific aspiration of people. We would like to see exactly the needs related to a specific activities, to a specific trip in some specific time, at some specific time of the day. The problem was how to listing the needs in this case. We said that it's very complicated, and but okay, we will try. Yeah, the first idea was to try to collecting. Oh, sorry. The first idea was to try to collecting the data, and to collecting the data, including socio-demographic aspects of people, a list of frequently conducted activities, and for defining the needs of these people, try to ask to them to choose 3 activities that they need to do each day, for example, in a list of needs. But this is, okay, we started by this, but when we define the needs satisfaction level, what we decided to do was just to try to be related to what, where the needs was not accomplished, if you want. So the idea is to see everything in the on the other side of the if you want the story, not on the need, on the part of the where the needs are satisfied, but where the needs are not satisfied. And when we focus on the unsatisfied needs, what we do with this. The idea is not to, okay, you are not satisfied, why you are not satisfied. We try to define the characteristic of these unsatisfied needs, and one of the attributes or characteristic that we can have is related, for example, with the travel time needs for doing the trip, or the crowdedness in public transport, etc. What we proposed was to, in the methodology, was to include 2 main steps. One was to focusing on not covered needs, and the other one was to try to exploring the activity characteristics that are related to the needs that is not covered. Okay, the idea is you have the needs, you have the activity that's covered these needs, and what we will try to, what makes sense for mobility or accessibility or for transport, generally speaking, is the attribute of the activity that is related to the transport. I mean, I can understand the objection that we don't deal with the competition for a bed in the hospital or whatever, but where we focus really was on this attribute, this characteristic of the activity that is very related to the trip. So we exploring the idea was to exploring these characteristics, and for doing that we decided we had the opportunity to use the metropolitan area of Barcelona and the data of the mobility survey of the metropolitan area of Barcelona. This is important for this approach because, okay, in the best of the world, you can do your own survey, and you can ask it. You can use the methodology that we presented just before. I asked for the more important activities, the attributes, satisfaction, and so on. But in the second best of the world, you can use as well the mobility survey that we already have, and you can see when this mobility surveys is quite related to a small area. I mean, you need to have a quite fine degree of geographical scale. And the second thing is that this mobility survey needs to have a section on the satisfaction related to the trip. This is very important. The needs is very related to one trip, one moment, and one person, and one activity. So this is the elements that we need to keep in the story and we need to have for implement the methodology. So we started, what we had for Barcelona was quite a huge survey, especially by a special point of view. We had very small areas with significant data, and we have the satisfaction related to the modes, to the trip of this, of the person of this area. So we, but of course the satisfaction was asked for travel time. This is what we had. We made with this, with travel time and as well modes. So what we defined was we took people living inside a specific area. This is very important for the implementation of methodology. We cannot have too big area because then the second point is to have as well a typology of trip that is the more, I would say, used typology, more frequent typology of trip of people living in the area that we are analyzing. So we define using what people said in the questionnaire. I really would try to highlight the idea that what we use the data that people answering in the survey. This is the way how we can listing the needs of people. Otherwise, we are a little bit out of the scope. So we use this kind the time threshold for each area. We estimate the time threshold, and at the same time we define the more problematic trips, the typology of the more problematic trips, and in this way we found the population groups who are in the needs because they are saying us that they are not satisfied about their trip in a kind of modes, etc. So we have a table with identified time thresholds, and that is including origin, destination, purpose, mode, and length of the trip. In this way, why it's important to have this kind of thresholds? Because the idea, I would try to remember you, is to go out from the paternalistic approach. So the idea is to use all information people are able to tell us about the satisfaction they have, and as well as in an objective way about the travel time of their trip. I mean, if they have a travel time that is below the threshold that we estimate for this specific zone, so this is the key point, the zone. So if it is below, we don't consider them. We consider the low satisfaction only when it is above the threshold of travel time. Of course, the indicator we had in this way is quite simple. It will be important to introduce some nuances for completing all the part of this table. But when we try to complete all this part of the table, we deal otherwise with the paternalistic approach. So we need to think about how to do that in a proper way. When we identify the needs in transport through the Inaccessibility Index that I will show you in a few seconds, what we expected to this index, and why this index is related to the needs approach, is that inaccessibility index makes sense when it's related to the essential activities. It is revealed by the lower satisfaction of people who participate, who are significant in the survey that we are analyzing. And these unmet needs is as well related to the social exclusion of people by itself. Okay, coming back to the analysis of the data, we find that for eliciting the people needs, we find that we have two groups of people who revealed that they were not happy, or in any case they were not satisfying the needs they have. It was the housewife and the retired people. And when we come back, we go to the definition of the inaccessibility index. The idea was to go out from the accessibility paradigm, because the accessibility is as well related to the, it's like a sum of different aspects, and from our point of view, for eliciting needs, we need to keep the difference instead of the homogenization. So it's for that we use the inaccessibility index, and we define this inaccessibility index related with the two main components. One is the threshold time that we defined before, related to the threshold time related to the typology of trips. And the second aspect was we don't consider all people who were in the other five part of this table. So we consider just the first square. In this way, we have we implement the index at scale of the metropolitan region of Barcelona, but just for the part, the eastern part, where the problem were more important for the by mobility transport point of view, and the idea, and we find that the housewife were cover less the needs to get to the food shopping. This means that this is like a caring activities of the housewife. They cannot easily access to the food shopping. And on the other part of the story, we have the retired man who seems not cover the needs to get the health care center. This is a quite interesting results, because we don't have any a priori about the population that we will find on the ground. Just the analysis and the methodology that we implement on the mobility survey database gave us this kind of result. I mean, it's interesting because we don't need to go with any approach for saying that these people are in need of some improvement in mobility or in transport. And if we have a little bit thinking about these two groups, we can say that both groups are very related with the caring mobility. So maybe this is just a call for practitioners or people who are in charge of mobility survey to include this purpose in their survey because it's hiding a lot of aspect of our daily mobility. And of course, it's more complex, and our partners are more and more complex, and even if for men and for women. And then the last part of the presentation is very related to how to use the Inaccessibility Index for eliciting needs for implementing to be implemented for evaluating a real transport infrastructure. So we had the chance to work for Transport Authority of Metropolitan Transport Authority of Barcelona, and they are dealing with the extension of a tramway for 1.5 kilometers, more or less, between two municipalities. One of them is quite socially with some social problem, so it's San Adrián. And Badalona is a part of activities related to the logistics, so it's like quite related to the logistic activities. So what we started to, how do we start to inform, to eliciting the tramway information? We define a buffer for seeing who were the people involved in the story, and what we are doing now, we already defined the index of inaccessibility. We are on the step of listing the needs, who are the more vulnerable people, and we are trying to see if these vulnerable people really will get some benefits from the extension of the tramway. And the way to do that is to, was the demand from the Transport Metropolitan Authority was to try to include the index on their multi-criteria framework. So we need to get by a number here. So this was the idea. And then we had the opportunity to have a second contract. The implementation about the Inaccessibility Index for this time for define the strategic plan for decreasing poverty in the eastern part of Barcelona. This will be very interesting for trying to see exactly what we can, how we can elicit the needs of people living there, and if these needs are related to the transport or bus network, etc. So this is where we are. If we go on the results and the conclusion, we have the good things of this approach is this is very easy to identify population groups, and we can easily define the policy that these population groups are in needs. We have the opportunity of reaching activities in a given area. Is given by the time thresholds, the transport network location, the user level of satisfaction regarding these needs. So these are all elements that we can find in some mobility survey that we already have. So we can analyze this not very easily, but we can do that. And then that there is like a network effect that is to the detriment of low-income social groups. when we have like a sparse public rail transport network, what we have seen in Barcelona was this. Actually, it's for that the idea is to build, or we are trying to check if it's a good idea to build a BRT network. And then the inclusion of the Inaccessibility Index provides a way as well to consider the equity in a non-paternalistic approach. I think that this is a very good advance if we achieve the consensus of the community in implementing this index. So thanks, and completely open to your questions.